Hello and welcome to the Hole in My Heart podcast. This is episode 240, how to help our kids engage a porn-saturated world without scaring or scarring them.
You see what I did there, Steve?
I like that.
Yeah, welcome to the Hole in My Heart podcast, where we talk about how the gospel is good news for everyone every day. I'm your host, Lori Krieg, and we are coming at you from the lovely WCSG radio studio. And I have alongside me my husband and favorite licensed therapist, Matt Krieg. Matt, how are you?
Hi, doing good. How are you?
Good. You glad to be here?
Mm-hmm.
Talking about living in a porn-saturated world without scaring or scarring them, Steve O'Dell. He has the most professional radio voice among us, and he is also our friend. How are you today?
I'm doing well. I had a little bit of a stressful morning, but I'm very glad to be here.
Yeah.
So thanks for letting me be here.
I'm so glad you are here. This is a place where we get to think about things with our minds and our hearts. And today, specifically, we're going to be talking about pornography. We've talked about it many times here on the podcast, and today we're going to be talking with parents and with someone who has created a video documentary series to help parents to engage a porn-saturated world, to help us with technology. I don't think we can have too many resources to help us know how to engage this, not just with our eyeballs, but with our minds and also our hearts. But Steve, who did we bring to talk about this?
John Michael Bout is the co-executive director. I think I got that right.
Yeah, that was Canadian enough. He's Canadian.
He's Canadian. He's the co-executive director and co-founder of Into the Light Ministries. He holds a BA from Brock University. He's working on an MDiv at SBTS. John Michael directed and produced the documentaries Ordinary Commission and Into the Light. He is married to his wife, Jessica, and they have 3 boys.
All right, well, let's welcome John Michael to the show officially. John Michael, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me on. I'm excited to talk to you guys.
We're so glad you're here.
Yeah, and we want to get to know you a little bit differently than normal. And so we're going to ask the question of the week from last time, which is, what TikTok, Instagram, or as seen on TV item have you ever purchased that was actually amazing?
This answer is going to tell you a little bit about me, which is, I guess, the point of asking. I do not go on Instagram, TikTok, or social media very often. So probably the last thing I've purchased based on like an ad or something I saw was like 5 years ago. And I got a coffee pour over thing because I absolutely love coffee. And I love different kind of versions of the coffee experience.
Yeah.
Very nice.
Mm-hmm. So our listening audience did not vibe with this question. We got 0 answers. Everyone was like, people on our Hole in My Heart podcast Facebook group, which is where I post this question. You guys search for that and you answer a couple questions and I'll let you in. Everyone was like, heart, which I hear you, podcast people. You're saying, good try, Lori.
But come on, no ShamWow, no magic
I feel
bullets,
like we purchase now unconsciously, you know, and I think maybe there are plenty of answers, but we just have forgotten. Oh, that was a thing that I saw on a thing and I did it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Matt and I purchased.
Let's be honest about who made this purchase and who unknowingly received this purchase.
I was like, I don't like the pores on my face. Thank you, my dad, who gave me these giant pores on my face. So why are we saying this? I'm going to keep going. And so I was like, let's look at this contraption that was definitely cookied to me. I don't know if it was actually on Instagram, whatever. I buy it. And I knew in my head, I was like, Matt is actually going to like this more than me. And so I'm like, hey, Matt, I spent X number of dollars on this thing. And he was like, gasp. And I didn't even flinch. I was like, Matt Krieg, I know you're going to love this. And guess who does love it more than me? The poor fixer-upper.
I don't know about more than you.
No, just go with it, honey. Just agree with me. I love your...
My tacit agreement means the world to you, yes.
Do you? You do?
I do enjoy it. It feels nice when it's done.
Anyway... That was the little tidbit about the Kriegs that you didn't know you needed, nor actually did you need. But
no one needed that.
You guys didn't answer, so we had to. Anyway, let's move on to the heart of the conversation. John Michael, we ask every guest this. If part of the gospel is I am more sinful and flawed in myself than I ever dared believe, yet more loved and accepted in Jesus Christ than I ever dared hope. If that is part of the gospel, when was the gospel first good news for you, and how is it still?
Such a good question. I love that quote. So, I mean, to kind of answer that, I have to go back a little bit to my childhood, and this will tee off kind of the topic of our conversation well. But grew up in a wonderful Christian home, parents who love the Lord, were invested in my life, discipling me. But even in the context of that kind of good gift, good family, I came across pornography for the first time when I was age 8. So super young, getting exposed. And for me, that kind of is deeply connected to my personal journey of sin, struggle, but then also the gospel hope coming in. So for almost a decade, I kind of lived the double lifestyle that so many people live, of involved in sin, pursuing pornography, getting further and further entrapped into that kind of pattern of living. And while at the same time, being involved in church and
Right.
leading worship stuff and at conferences and lots of good theological jargon and talk, while at the same time just fostering and feeding a addiction to pornography and even a sinful desire for things beyond that. So that kind of process continued to go on until I was 16, 17. And by God's grace, he put some good guy friends in my life that were, an example of what it means to be a godly man who's not perfect, who doesn't have like everything, his full act together, but was willing to be vulnerable, willing to be an example and talk about areas of sin, talk about areas of struggle. And we were sitting in my parents' garage. They were talking about a purity conference they had been to. And I just felt the conviction of the Holy Spirit, like, man, if you don't open up about this sin, this struggle, you never will. And you're going to remain a hypocrite living your double lifestyle for the rest of your life. And in that moment, that was the first time I ever told anyone, the first time I ever confessed that sin to anyone, and really was the turning point in my kind of journey with fighting pornography, but even with just walking with the Lord. It was after that point that I could start kind of saying, in truth, I love the Lord. And I wasn't perfect. I didn't immediately, boom, stop struggling. But that was when the trajectory started to go uphill and started to see patterns of, faith and repentance, knowing that, the love of God is for me, and that changes my life. So I don't know if that's
Thanks for sharing.
digging
That's
deeper
great.
than you
No,
want.
it's exactly what we need to hear. Thank you for sharing. And it's going to really be a good baseline for which we talk about the rest of this conversation.
Yeah. So you produced a documentary to help parents navigate kind of like the porn culture. Can you tell us a little of the motivation behind that, where that all came from, how that happened?
Yeah, great question. I mean, the motivation, kind of the heart behind producing this series called Parenting and Pornography, Roadmaps to Raising Children of Integrity, is my own story. The average age of exposure to pornography is age 8. And I'm a living, walking statistic of that. And that's true even in Christian homes. And so, we live in a culture that is incredibly sexualized, pornified, and is not just like 40 years ago where, there's pornography out there. You can go find it if you want to. The difference is now it's actually targeting our families. It's targeting people in our church. And, we've got sinful desires. So it's easy to fall into that pattern of sin and addiction. So parents often are like, man, we live in a technology world. I know there's pornography out there. I have no idea what to do. It's kind of the throw your hands up in the air, maybe bury your head in the sand sort of approach. And I always want to say to parents, yeah, this is hard. Yeah, this is challenging. We do live in kind of a unique time, but God has given you everything you need to talk about sexuality, the dangers of pornography, and his good design for family. And offer out, here's what it looks like. And that's what this series, Parenting and Pornography, walks through. It's a masterclass series that talks about, how to lay the foundations with your children at a young age, how to start preparing them to face pornography, because they will face it at some point. And then even to help parents major on the invitations of God's good design, not just the prohibitions of don't do this or, don't look at that, which are all true. But sometimes it's the only message we teach our children or that we hear in the church. And we forget, God's given us a good and a beautiful gift of marriage and family. God created the orgasm. So let's talk about the positive good and beauty as well, just as much as we talk about the bad. And that's what this masterclass series, aims to help parents do.
So you said that you are a statistic of that 8-year-old, being exposed for the first time, and that is the average age of pornography. I know my story includes pornography. Steve's story includes pornography. How prevalent is it? What are the latest studies showing as far as how widespread this issue is?
Yeah, I think it can sound hyperbolic. When I share statistics, I tend not to talk too much about those and just dive into personal stories because I think that's where boots hit the ground a little bit more for people. But it is worth knowing that it's depending on the age demographic, anywhere between 70 to 90% of young men have been exposed to or looked at pornography within the last year or even the last few months. We also know that the exposure to pornography and kind of addiction to pornography for women has significantly increased in the last 5 to 10 years. So I think the last statistic I saw was like under 25, 60% of young women have now been exposed by age 25. And so, there's numbers about pastors, about even parents being addicted and exposed. So in many ways, I often describe this as the burning house fire that every church has in their congregation, that every family will have to face. And it sounds kind of hyperbolic, but it's actually just the reality. We live in a technology age where I can access more dangerous content, more explicit images, in 3 seconds, 3 clicks, 30 seconds, than even like the richest prince would have had access to in his lifetime. And we just have that in our pockets, on our TV, all around us. And so I think the access and the anonymity of how pornography works now is why these statistics are so crazy high, and why it's really important to be intentional as parents, as pastors, as church leaders, to talk about these issues and to protect our homes.
Can you talk to us a little bit? Because I can feel my own anxiety rising as you're talking, and I'm like, ugh, my kids. And we've talked about porn 50 trillion times on this podcast, truly. Can you pause for a second and let's go to empathy? Let's go to the empathy for you as the 8-year-old. We've talked with Dan Allender, we've talked with Julia Sadusky. They call the first exposures to pornography trauma. And I believe it is, because a child can never prepare their brain or their heart for what they're about to see. Can you speak to that a little bit? Let's have a little empathy for kids, that they're not just these little demons looking for demon stuff. Like it's just a natural curiosity to want to look at things. And then it's a trauma when they encounter this. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think at the heart of every kind of situation where there's pornography going on is good and holy desires that are finding their end in a counterfeit, in the wrong thing. And so I always, especially when someone first opens up, whether it's a really young child or someone who's been struggling for a long time, just want to say, like, it's an evidence of God's grace in your life that you're willing to talk about this. And these desires for affirmation, for approval, for these, for intimacy, these are God-given desires that are just being found or trying to be met in the wrong place. And I also want to help parents and the child themselves kind of grieve over this situation. Like, this is a product of the fall. This is a product of sin in the world. You should never have had to be exposed to these images, and your story shouldn't have to have this in it anymore. But it is the reality of the world that we live in. And then also, just if there's anyone listening to this, this is part of your story, or you're a young man or woman, I just want to encourage you that there's no one that's too far gone for the gospel. Jesus restores anyone in any situation. And you may have just stumbled across something out of curiosity, on accident, or maybe looking for something. But there's always hope for you, no matter where you are in the situation. And you can always walk in freedom and walk in the light.
I like that. Just helping our children to assimilate, or to, kind of get their brains around what has happened, with empathy and speaking to it honestly and with kindness and tenderness and love. So that's after the fact. Let's back up to before the fact. How do you instruct parents to prepare their children, knowing the world and the culture that we live in, just letting them know the reality of that without, I guess, traumatizing them in the preparation? How do you handle the beforehand conversations?
This is, I think, the question that parents are kind of, what do I do? What do I say? How do I protect, or how do I instruct my children? So I think this is kind of the heart of what's important to talk about. And this is what the masterclass series, Parenting and Pornography, kind of aims to do. So everything I'm about to share is kind of in that series, but more robust and deeper. I think the first thing parents, kind of foundation parents, need to know is that this is going to be the kind of conversation that feels awkward at first, and maybe feels like, man, if I start talking to my child at 8 years old, I'm going to be introducing things, and I'm going to make them start to be curious about topics that they're not ready for. So I think that's often the very first kind of pushback that parents will offer about talking to their children is, not yet, let's wait a little bit longer. And what I want to say to that is, there's good studies to show that the first person to teach on a topic will be considered the expert. So as a parent, you want to be the expert when it comes to questions of sexuality, identity, gender, pornography. And you establish that when you're the first one to come to your child, not their friends on the school bus, not pornography, not just Wikipedia, but when you're the first one to talk to your children and just start laying foundations. So what does that look like? What does it look like to start talking? I would say talk early, talk often, and talk biblically. So these kind of three categories to help set the approach. So talk early. What does that mean? If the average age of exposure is age 8, well, then you need to be laying some foundations before 8 years old. It doesn't mean the full conversation. It doesn't mean here's exactly what pornography is and here's why it's going to just ruin your life. It could be more like, hey, God's made our bodies good. God has made marriage the place where, sexual expression happens. Just basic truths that you can start laying. And then even ones like, hey, if you ever come across pictures online that make you feel uncomfortable, or of people with not very much clothes on, you should come to daddy and mommy, close the computer or the picture right away, and know that we're not going to be mad at you. We're not going to be angry with you. We're actually going to be really happy that you came and told us. Which sounds really simple and basic, but just starting to lay that kind of foundation with your children that they're not going to be in trouble. You're going to be happy they told you. And that there's bad pictures online and there's good pictures online, and there's differences, and the way you feel about it can actually be a good kind of metric. So that's talking early. Talk often. I think one problem that often people run into is they have one conversation about the birds and the bees, about what sex and sexuality is, and that's it. And they think they've kind of check off the mark. And honestly, praise God that you even had one conversation. That's awesome. But I would encourage parents, start with little foundations and make those regular. It doesn't mean every day, but it also should be more than once or twice a year. So kind of revisiting, hey, do you have any questions about sexuality, or have you ever come across any pictures online that make you feel uncomfortable? Or are kids in school right now looking at pornography? What do you think of that? Has anyone tried to show you anything? Just asking probing questions to dig into situations and dig into the heart. Keeping the regular conversation up makes you the authority. And then last, talk biblically. I think one of the greatest temptations is to talk in aphorisms that are not biblical. And again, to major on prohibitions of don't, and minor on the invitations of the goodness of the body, the goodness of marriage and family, the fact that God is pro sex and sexuality within the context that He's designed it to be. I think it's so important for us to speak biblically as we start early and we talk often.
So there's a lot going through my mind, because the ages that we're talking about here, our kids are age 5 up to 10 years old, and I think of our youngest, our son, who is 5, and these are really the conversations that I will need to be starting to have with him very soon. And I guess the one thing you said earlier, after the exposure, like to approach with grace, to approach with the like, thank you for sharing, like we're so proud of you, but laying that foundation early of when or if you are exposed to this, like I'm going to be here for you. And so aside from that gracious kind of laying the foundation, trying to be that anchoring bias, that expert that the kid knows to come to you, when this type of thing hits home, are there any other responses? Are there any other tools that you would give to parents for how they can respond, assuming that the starting foundation is like that gracious like desire to hear from the kid?
Yeah, no, that's really good. I mean, I think a really important first step would be, after all the things you just shared, would be to make sure your home is safe with technology. So what do I mean by that? That looks like taking, if you have a family iPad or your child has a phone or you've got a computer, setting up protections, accountability software, some restrictions and some passwords that basically kind of put guardrails and sort of offensive protection around your house, specifically doing that quickly for your family, because that child, depending on how old they are, may not yet have the self-control or the character yet to resist going back to it. And so as a parent, you want to do your job of shepherding your children, shepherding their hearts, but also protecting their hearts, protecting their souls. And one way of doing that is just by having protection set up on your devices. I think that can sound really overwhelming to parents. So people listening might be like, yeah, great. You sound like a young guy. You probably know how to, you're a digital native. You probably know how to set up your phone. I'm 45 with teens and they're light years ahead of me on technology. How am I going to set up protections that actually are effective with them? So I think that's a super valid question. But I'd say don't let that count you out of the conversation. And then I would point you to another resource that we just released called TechSafe. So TechSafe is basically a set of tutorials that walk through all the different devices in your household. So smart TVs, gaming consoles, iPhone, computer, whatever it is, and then walks through, here's how information flows into your home. Here's the different danger points, key access points where pornography or predators may be accessing your home or your children. And then offering out very specific tools to filter, monitor, and block each one of those access points, and kind of move your devices, move your home and the technology in your home from like a 10% safe, very open, and kind of in a dangerous spot, to more of like an 80 or a 90% safe, where it's far more accountability, far more protections, dangerous things filtered out. And that series, TechSafe, walks through kind of the step-by-step guides that you'll need to implement that on every different device in the typical American home.
That's great. Mm-hmm. What if our kid has engaged pornography and we're like, oh my word, you've been watching this for a year or 2 or 3. What do we do?
Oh man. I can imagine parents listening to this and feeling like maybe one of two reactions. like, oh, like that would never be my child. My child would never do that. Or just like sort of this sick feeling inside. Um, I think that's going to be the first response parents have often. It's just like a deep sadness and like, I just can't believe it. If you find out that your child's been watching, not just for like, it's not just they have been exposed, they've been watching for 1, 2, 5, 10 years and you didn't know it. And so I'd encourage parents first to like just ground yourself in the grace of the gospel. There is grace for parents. There's no such thing as a perfect parent. And we have a perfect Heavenly Father. So take hope in that. But I would say also at this point, you're going to want to probe into the situation. So I think there can be a bit of a temptation to like, thank you for telling me, let's set up some stuff on your phone. And then kind of like, well, that was awkward. Let's wrap that conversation up. And I would encourage you just to slow it down, maybe take some time to get on your own with your husband or wife and calm down and settle some of those emotions in prayer, and then come back to your child and say, let's press into this a little bit more. What was going on? What was going on in your heart? Like, when did you first get exposed? How long has this been going on? Is there more? I think that's a really helpful question to kind of keep asking. Is there more? Is there something else that you haven't shared with us? Because sometimes pornography use leads into, online chatting. It can lead to soliciting things from other people. It can even lead to in-person, kind of meetups or other things, other versions of sexual sin that are, being drawn into because of pornography use. And so you want to not presume that, not like say, hey, did you do this thing? But just keep asking and probing into it. Like, is there more that you need to share? And then meet them with grace, meet them with a response like, thank you for sharing. But also meet them with the fact that, hey, this is really important. This is serious. And so there are going to be some consequences for this. It does mean that mom and dad need to have some accountability, and we're going to be more involved in your technology use. There might be a kind of step back with kind of the access that you have until you can prove integrity online. And then I think that's an opportunity for you to start pairing them up with an accountability partner. If it's your daughter, then asking, is there a godly woman in the church that you would want to meet up with regularly to read a good book on this or to hold you accountable? Or if it's your son, say, hey, is there a guy in the church that you would want to regularly meet up with? I think that helps you as a parent not just be the only one involved in the situation, but start surrounding yourself with a team of people who love and care for your children, who will help them walk in integrity.
Mm-hmm. So if I can jump in, because like how you're talking, like hey, step back, calm down your own emotions, and then like approach the child with grace, with like a very controlled and measured emotional stance in yourself. Pornography, this is a large percentage of what I work with, with guys in counseling, and pornography is about safety, it's about control, and it's about intimacy and connection. And so pornography, when someone is viewing it and any type of voyeuristic behavior, it's gaining intimate access towards something without yourself becoming vulnerable at all. And so in the approach to talk to kids, to talk to whether they're young, whether they're teenagers, whether this is your spouse and your adults, like the more that there's this like accusation or like something that would instill a sense of I'm not safe, that's actually going to more than likely drive people back into pornography use. And so that first thing you said of like stepping back, becoming safe in yourself so that you're not like approaching in this agitated, like hair on fire type of way is super important for when you're talking with anyone. And I'm assuming even more so if it's your child, because it's such a different cognitive, development state and everything. Yeah. And so
it's good, man.
What you're saying really reminds me of Galatians 6, 1-2, I think it is, where, it says, if anyone's caught in transgression, You who are spiritual should restore him with the spirit of gentleness. So there's the gentleness piece. But then it says, keep watch on yourself also, lest you too be tempted. Bear one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ. So I think kind of like there, it's like you got the gentleness, restore. If someone's caught in a transgression, meet them with gentleness. But also you got to be aware of your own heart. Like as a parent, we might be tempted to sinful anger or tempted to sinful self-pity, or even to, to anger against our spouse. There's various versions of what might be going on there. So I think it's really important, like you're saying, to kind of ground yourself and then approach it with kind of a spirit of gentleness.
We're hearing about a lot of great tools for parents and things I wish I had, when my kids were younger, but I still will kind of like take some of these principles with me as I interact with my kids and now my grandkids. So that's very helpful. I guess I'm wondering if you have any examples of, families that have done this well, parents or kids, that have kind of gone through this process, either, preparing their kids or responding when they find something out. Do you have any, like, for lack of a better word, success stories to encourage us?
Oh man, yeah, that's a great question. I think a few stories come to mind. Sometimes you only get snapshots of a section of people's stories because they come in and out of your life. So some of the ones I've most recently encountered are the kind of the first initial ones where the parents themselves are not really taking responsibility through conviction of the Holy Spirit, through good resources like this one. They recognize, man, I've got to start talking about this with my kids. And then they go and actually apologize. The one I'm thinking of, they have older teens, and they basically went to their children and were like, hey, I'll be honest, we've missed the boat on this topic. We haven't really talked to you guys about sexuality and pornography, and we just want to apologize to you for that. God's given us the task of talking about this, and we haven't really done that, and we want to change in this area, and we want to start, having good discussions as a family about what it means to be a man and a woman who loves the Lord and walks in integrity. So I love hearing stories like that because I think it highlights it's never too late to start doing something. It's never too late to start turning around a ship that maybe it's been sailing in the wrong direction. And because I think sometimes success stories for parents can feel like, yeah, that's idealistic. You don't know my children. That wouldn't work with my kids, that conversation scenario you just played out. But I just always want to meet people with the hope of the gospel that no one is too far gone and no family is beyond, having these conversations be a really important and fruitful step in discipling their children. So I don't know if that's quite what you're asking for.
No, that's great.
I find that story that's really encouraging.
Yeah.
How, and this might seem like a stupid question, but how important is it for parents to do their own heart work, to assess their own journey, whether it's with pornography, whether it's about technology use or control and anxiety or whatever? Like, we all have our thing that we struggle with. How important is it for a parent to really know and understand and be on their own journey as they're trying to lead their kids through this kind of sex-saturated, pornified world?
I actually think that question isn't a very insightful one, because often when I talk to parents about this topic, they're really oriented towards their children. And I understand that. It's right, in a sense, rightly so. But they tend to skip over their own heart. They skip over their own story. And so even in the structure of the 9 episodes of our masterclass series, episodes 7, 8, and 9 are really like technology focused. They're child focused. But episodes 1, 2, and 3 are focused on the parent. And that's really strategic because before we, move to talking to our children, we need to stop and look at our own hearts. Many of us bring abuse into the story, abused in our childhood. And that has led to us, you know, acting out in certain ways or to our desire to talk about this with our children being kind of covered with fear and anxiety, or we're struggling with pornography ourselves, maybe in the past, maybe in the present. And, all of these different factors that play into how we're going to talk to our children or why not we might talk to them at all. And so that's why I think it's so important to start with yourself and humble yourself before the Lord, maybe even confess past or current sin to a brother or sister in your church, or get counseling if you haven't dealt with some of the things in your childhood. And then you can walk into those conversations with your children, not as a perfect parent, but as a parent who has embraced the gospel as true for them, and that the gospel can transform their hearts. And I want to say, parent, don't think that's actually a knock against you in this. That actually could be an asset for you in these conversations. This is an opportunity for you to be vulnerable with your children and say, hey, mommy and daddy are not perfect. We failed in this too. And then tell your story. I think that can be an avenue for your children to then open up and feel like, yeah, mom and dad are safe people to talk to about this. Mom and dad are not some perfect, God over us that if we confess to, they're just going to be like condemnation. So hopefully that helps.
All right, let's land the plane with some hope for the parent who is kind of drinking the condemnation juice right now and is like, you're talking about leading our kids. I'm still stuck in this. You're saying stuff that feels way too far ahead. I just can't even move. Like, can you talk to that parent who feels very stuck, or a youth pastor who is not a parent? I know the statistics for youth pastors and pastors. It's high. I think it's 64% of pastors and youth pastors currently or have struggled with pornography. 54% of Christians are watching it on the regs. You talk to people who are just stuck and they don't feel like they have a leg to stand on.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this is the theme that has to be kind of constantly ringing in the Christian life. It's not our perfect performance that is what merits us grace. It's Jesus Christ and his righteousness. And so if we believe that, true gospel, then that means that we can have hope to get up again and again and again, even when we struggle, even when we feel like failures, even when we feel like we're kind of, we shouldn't be in the conversation. Just remember the gospel, kind of go back to those first principles. And like Paul in Galatians, like, why would you move so quickly beyond the gospel that you first believed? Take hold of the Psalms, take hold of scripture. Remember that James 5 says, confess your sins one to another that you may be healed. So know there's hope and know that there's a path forward for you, even if you're struggling yourself.
Man, thank you so much, John Michael, for filling us with hope and insight and real practical application for parents and caregivers of the next generation. We will link to the documentary to your site so that people can watch a quick trailer as they consider diving in and purchasing this to be able to really be equipped. But thank you so much.
Yeah. Well, and the last thing I wanted to add on that is it's totally free. Both our documentary, our parenting series, and the Tech Safe series.
Dude.
It's all on our website, intothelightministries.ca, for free to use, which is made possible by our generous donors. So please do not hesitate to make use of that series.
So there's no blocks for parents. There's no blocks for caregivers to really accessing this resource in order to equip the next generation. So thank you so much for removing those blockades to your generous donors and for creating this valuable resource.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on, Lori.
All right. So we just said an official goodbye to John Michael. Matt, Steve, I hear your brain's whirring. Matt, I'll start with you.
Yeah.
What are you chewing on?
I mean, there's a lot. I do love what he just said right there at the end, that confession, from James chapter 5. What was going on in my head was Psalm 32, because that was such an integral part of my own kind of coming clean, that says when you confess, the kind of the weight of the sin and the hiding and everything is lifted off of you. And I just, there's so much that I feel like we're trying to do right. There's so much that I feel like we could continue to do, like even talking about really securing everything, from the devices themselves to our actual home network and all that kind of stuff. There's still steps to take. So I feel like there's just a kind of a reminder of like, yep, got to do it. I have to do it.
How about you, Steve?
Similar. My kids are adults now, but just what he said about the family, the parents who apologized to their kids. I know we didn't have a very internet safe and secure home, although there were seasons where we tried, and there were different tools at the time, but I think I probably could have been more diligent, and I know things got through. And so I think probably my own focus on working on myself distracted me from what my kids were vulnerable to. So I think just having a conversation of saying, I know we could have done better, and I know, you're in this struggle now yourself, just as an adult and living in this culture and in this world, and just like having the conversation like now as adults, I think really kind of spoke to me.
The research on that, because I'm just always researching this right now, is kids want to talk about it with their parents. And they want to talk about porn with their parents, and they want to talk about sex with their parents, but they don't know how to bring it up. So, but they're actually looking to their parents to be self-regulated about how to feel about the conversation. So like, we're nervous, they're nervous, and we just got to get over it. And we just have to have the conversation.
And I think also, when you are hiding and living in secret, it is a relief for that to no longer be a secret,
Psalm
and
32.
Yeah. So anyway.
I feel a little discouraged, honestly. Like I hear all this research. I'm always in this research, and I'm just like, does this have to be? It's just like that's how it feels. It feels like wah wah. Everybody has to deal with this. Every kid is gonna see it, and they're all gonna struggle. To be honest, I'm like, man, I'm so sick of that. So my heart is like, yes, I want to block things practically. I want to have the conversations, and then I just want to pray too. Like, God, will you please just help my kids? Like, let's do the practical stuff and let's help them. This is the hope for me. This is where I end up having hope. Is he talked about heart needs stuff. He said, that's why we run to porn. You guys have talked about this all the time. That's why I ran to sexual sin. How can we teach our kids ways to meet the emptiness inside in ways that are glorifying to God and are bless themselves? Like, that's where I get the hope, is I want to pray. And then I'm like, okay, how can I teach my kids how to emotionally deal with this wild world in healthy ways? That gives me hope.
Yeah. Well, and I would say like the filtering piece.
Yeah.
You might accidentally stumble across porn as a kid, but it is not an accident. Like the algorithms, the way that pornography is hunting. And so like having the filters, having the software that's going to like block that, and then it's taking money away from porn, right? Because they're not getting the clicks, they're not getting the same access, even if you're curbing it by 20%.
Right, that's great.
Like that can be 20% less revenue for this industry that is actively hunting your kids. And so like, yes, the heart work as an individual, that is first and foremost it. But no, like we can make a dent.
Yeah.
And the actual revenue, the actual ability for pornography to self-propagate the way that it does.
Yeah. This is good.
Yeah.
I'm glad we're having this post conversation. I'm like, man, it's just, we've heard it. And it's just
Right.
like, well, the
Yeah.
world sucks and everything sucks. Try and do better.
Yeah.
But that's not the reality. And that's not what he was saying. There is hope.
What I'm hearing
Yeah.
is, first of all, from what you said, Lori, I just thought there is no behavior that's disconnected from the heart.
Yeah.
And so if we can look at what's going on in the heart, that's driving behavior, and if we can see our kids' hearts as not black and evil, because I think that's something that we wrestle with as well, but see their hearts as good and God-given, and, then address what's going on there with behavior. And with what you're saying, Matt, it's like we could actually affect an industry. I feel like let's end slavery. Like that's the industry of our time that we need to stand against. So anyway,
This is good.
Yeah.
This is good. Thanks for this post conversation, guys. And thank you so much to John Michael Bout. You said not boot. Bout.
Boat.
I think I said it Canadian enough. For inspiring this conversation, for doing this good, hard work, for helping to equip parents. And seriously, truly, I am in the donor relations business. And thank you to the donors who created this free resource. Also, thank you to WCSG. And before I finish it up and thank the Jack of all trades, the Zach of all trades, as well as Hunter, I want to give you the question of the week for next time, which maybe will be better. Matt just sorted through our 5-year-old's stack of books, and he got rid of all the good ones, like Berenstain Bears, including the Berenstain Bears Messy Room, which is like peak cleaning, like gives me a high to see them
get rid of them.
They're in the hallway. That looks like the get rid of box.
There's certain ones need to be just boxed up and stored
Forever.
The Berenstain
in my
Bears
heart.
Messy Room. just I need to frame that final picture of the
Messy
room.
room when it
Anyway.
gets in every detailed box. Do you know what I'm talking about?
No.
Oh, you're missing out.
You're
Okay,
missing
okay.
out. It goes from messy to clean. It's like the best before and after. My Embarrassing Bears Messy Room. What was your favorite children's book reading up? Obviously, you heard mine. I want to hear what you guys like. Now I'm going to thank Zach of all trades, WCSG, the hunter in the library, who's hunting down his favorite children's book this week. Thank you, the listener and viewer on YouTube, for joining us today. Thanks again to John Michael for joining us, and for all of us here at the Whole Merit Podcast. We'll see you next time.